When I finally told the truth about being raped while unconscious at 17, everyone said I was ruining my attacker's life over something that happened when he was just a child. But watching my best friend date my rapist for 10 years while I carried the trauma alone taught me that some people will always protect predators over survivors. When his family invited me to celebrate their new baby, I realized my silence was enabling him to build a life around children, and my decision to finally speak up tore apart everyone who had spent a decade pretending my assault never happened. Right at that moment when I thought I understood what family loyalty and true friendship looked like, I had no idea that the people I trusted most in the world would eventually choose to protect my rapist rather than support me through the darkest period of my life. Let me take you back to the beginning, because understanding the depth of these relationships makes the betrayal that followed so much more devastating. When I was 6 years old, I met Angie, and from that moment forward, she wasn't just my best friend, she was my chosen sister, my other half, the person who knew every secret, every dream, and every fear I carried in my heart. For 12 years, from age 6 to 18, Angie and I were inseparable in the way that only childhood best friends can be. We spent entire weekends at each other's houses, not as guests but as family members who belonged in each other's spaces. We celebrated holidays together, shared family traditions, and created memories that I thought would last a lifetime. When my own family was falling apart during my parents' ugly divorce in second grade, it was Angie's family who took me in, giving me a safe place to sleep and the stability that my own home couldn't provide during that chaotic time. Our bond went deeper than typical friendship. We were so committed to being part of each other's lives that we even learned each other's languages. I picked up Russian from spending so much time with her family, while she learned Spanish to better connect with mine. Her older brother and little sister weren't just her siblings to me. They were my siblings too, and I genuinely believed that we would all be connected for life. But there's another crucial element to my story that made me particularly vulnerable, and that's my heart condition. Growing up, I dealt with a serious cardiac issue that required careful management and regular medication. Without getting too deep into the medical details, I had to take powerful drugs whenever my heart rate became irregular, because if I didn't act immediately, the pain would become excruciating, my heart would literally cramp, and I would start hyperventilating until I lost consciousness. Everyone in my inner circle knew about my condition, including all the important safety information that came with it. They knew I had to be extremely careful about mixing my heart medication with alcohol because the combination would cause me to black out completely. This wasn't casual social drinking we're talking about. Even one glass of wine could be dangerous if I needed to take my medication afterward. Because of my health issues, I was naturally cautious about drinking and smoking during my teenage years. I would only drink at home or in settings where I felt completely safe, surrounded by people I trusted to take care of me if something went wrong. The legal drinking age where we lived was 16, so it wasn't unusual for teenagers to have wine or beer occasionally, but I was always hyper-aware of the risks and only participated when I knew I was in good hands. This careful, trust-based approach to managing my health condition is what made me feel secure enough to have my first romantic experiences. When I started dating Nico at 17, one of Angie's other close friends who was also Russian, I felt completely safe because he was part of our tight-knit group, someone who knew about my medical needs and who I believed would always prioritize my well-being over anything else. Little did I know that the very vulnerability I shared with my closest friends, the medical condition that required their protection and understanding, would become the weapon used to violate me in the most unimaginable way. But the safety and trust I had built my entire world around was about to be shattered in the most devastating way possible. And it would happen on what should have been a perfectly ordinary evening with the person I thought I could trust with my life. It was a typical Friday night when I was 17, and my parents were out of town for the weekend. Nico came over for what we planned as a quiet date night at home, nothing fancy, just ordering pizza, watching movies, and enjoying each other's company in the comfort and privacy of my family's house. Everything felt normal and safe, exactly the kind of low-key evening that worked well with my health condition and our established relationship routine. We decided to share a bottle of wine with dinner, something we had done before without any issues. I was always careful to limit myself to just one glass because I knew my limits, and Nico was well aware of my heart condition and the precautions I needed to take. About halfway through the evening, my heart started acting up, that familiar irregular beating that meant I needed to take my medication immediately before the pain became unbearable. I explained to Nico what was happening, took my prescribed medication as I always did, and told him I would probably need to lie down soon because the combination of the wine and the heart medication would likely make me drowsy. This was standard protocol for me, something that had happened before, and I trusted that he understood the situation completely. Within minutes, I felt the familiar wave of exhaustion washing over me, and I told him I needed to go to my bedroom to sleep it off. The last thing I remember clearly was lying down on my bed, feeling safe and secure in my own home with someone I loved and trusted. The medication did exactly what it was supposed to do. It regulated my heart rate and knocked me unconscious, which was the normal and expected result of taking it after drinking alcohol. When I woke up the next morning, something felt immediately wrong. I was sore in places that didn't make sense. My body felt different, and I had this overwhelming sense that something had happened while I was unconscious, but I couldn't piece together what it might have been. I felt confused and disoriented, but I pushed those feelings aside because I trusted Nico completely and couldn't imagine that anything inappropriate had occurred. A few weeks later, I realized my period was late, which sent me into a panic because Nico and I had always been extremely careful about protection. When I brought up my concerns about potentially being pregnant, that's when the truth came out in the most casual, horrifying way imaginable. "Oh, don't worry about that," he said, as if he was discussing something as mundane as the weather. "I had sex with you that night when you were unconscious, but I didn't finish inside you, so you should be fine." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him in complete shock, unable to process what he had just admitted to so casually. When I asked him how he could possibly think that was okay, his response made everything so much worse. "We've had sex before, so I didn't think much about it," he said with a shrug, as if my consciousness and consent were irrelevant details in our relationship. "Besides, I know you wanted to have sex that night anyway, so I just went ahead and did it while you were sleeping." I felt violated and disgusted by myself. I didn't know how to describe this overwhelming mixture of betrayal, horror, and confusion that was consuming me. The person I had trusted with my deepest vulnerability had used my medical condition as an opportunity to assault me, and he genuinely seemed to believe that our previous consensual encounters somehow gave him permanent access to my body, conscious or not. In that moment, I realized that the boy I thought I loved had never seen me as a person deserving of basic respect and bodily autonomy. I was just an object for his convenience, and my trust had been the weapon he used to destroy me. But the nightmare I thought couldn't possibly get any worse was about to take a turn that would destroy not just my relationship with Nico, but the most important friendship of my entire life, leaving me completely isolated in my trauma with nowhere to turn for support. I immediately broke up with Nico after his horrifying confession, but the emotional devastation I felt went far beyond ending a romantic relationship. I felt like my entire understanding of trust, safety, and human decency had been shattered. The one person who was supposed to protect me when I was at my most vulnerable had instead chosen to violate me, and I was struggling to process the magnitude of that betrayal while dealing with all the complex emotions that come with being sexually assaulted by someone you loved. In my desperation for support and understanding, I turned to the one person I thought would always be there for me no matter what. My best friend Angie, my chosen sister who had been my rock through every other crisis in my life. I told her everything that had happened, expecting her to be as horrified and outraged as I was. I needed her to validate my feelings, to confirm that what Nico had done was unforgivable, and to help me figure out how to move forward from this trauma. Instead, Angie's response left me feeling even more isolated and confused than before. "You were in a relationship with him," she said dismissively, as if that somehow justified or excused what he had done to me. She didn't seem to understand that being in a relationship doesn't give someone the right to have sex with an unconscious person, and she certainly didn't grasp the violation I felt at having my medical vulnerability exploited in such a horrific way. But then, just a few months later, Angie delivered the final blow that would completely destroy our friendship and leave me feeling utterly abandoned. She started dating Nico, the same person who had raped me while I was unconscious, the same person whose actions had traumatized me so deeply that I couldn't even function normally anymore, was now the love of my best friend's life. When I tried to explain to Angie that I couldn't be around Nico, that seeing him triggered panic attacks and brought back all the trauma of what he had done to me, she acted like I was being unreasonable and dramatic. "I don't understand where you're coming from," she told me, as if my inability to socialize with my rapist was some kind of personal character flaw rather than a completely normal trauma response. The message was crystal clear: Angie had chosen Nico over me. She had decided that her romantic happiness was more important than supporting her supposed best friend through the aftermath of sexual assault. Every time I tried to visit her or maintain our friendship, I was forced to see my rapist sitting in her living room, acting like nothing had happened, while Angie expected me to just get over it and pretend everything was fine. Eventually, I stopped trying to maintain contact altogether because the situation had become emotionally unbearable. I couldn't handle watching my former best friend build a loving relationship with the person who had destroyed my sense of safety and trust. For the next several years, I followed them from a distance on social media, watching as they celebrated anniversaries, took romantic vacations, and built what appeared to be a perfect life together. Meanwhile, I was dealing with the long-term psychological effects of the assault completely alone. I couldn't have sex for almost 2 years afterward because the trauma was so severe, and I had no support system to help me work through the complex emotions I was experiencing. Every milestone in their relationship felt like another reminder that my pain didn't matter, that my trauma was less important than their happiness, and that speaking up about what had happened would only make me the villain in their love story. For 9 long years, I carried this secret burden while watching my rapist and my former best friend live their fairy tale, never knowing that their foundation of happiness was built on my silence and my suffering. But after nearly a decade of carrying this devastating secret alone, fate would finally present me with a moment of truth that would force everything into the light, and it would come through the most unexpected source, Angie's own brother, the same person who had treated me like family all those years ago. Out of nowhere, I received a message from Angie's older brother, the same guy who had been like a protective big brother to me throughout our childhood. He was reaching out because Angie was pregnant and planning a baby shower, and he wanted to know if I would be interested in attending. After years of complete silence between our families, he was hoping to facilitate some kind of reconciliation and bring everyone back together for this joyful occasion. The invitation stirred up so many conflicting emotions. Part of me missed Angie desperately and wondered if enough time had passed for us to somehow repair our friendship. I had genuinely loved her family, and the thought of meeting her baby and being part of that celebration felt both appealing and terrifying. But when I asked if Nico would be attending the shower, her brother confirmed that of course he would be there. After all, he was the father of the baby and Angie's long-term partner. I politely declined the invitation, explaining that I couldn't attend if Nico was going to be present, but I kept my reasoning vague, referring to him simply as an ex-boyfriend that I preferred not to see. However, Angie's brother could tell there was much more to the story than I was letting on. He had known me since I was 6 years old, and he could sense that my discomfort went far beyond typical post-breakup awkwardness. He pressed me gently for more details, assuring me that he genuinely cared about my well-being and wanted to understand what had happened between all of us. The conversation continued over several days, and I could feel the weight of my secret becoming heavier and heavier. Finally, after nearly 10 years of silence, I made the decision to tell him the truth about what Nico had done to me. The reaction was immediate and powerful. Angie's brother was absolutely horrified when I explained how Nico had raped me while I was unconscious from my heart medication, and how Angie had dismissed my trauma before choosing to date my rapist. He was furious that his sister had not only failed to support me, but had actively chosen to build a relationship with someone who had committed such a serious crime against her childhood best friend. What happened next completely blindsided everyone involved. Angie's brother immediately called off the baby shower and told his family that he would not allow a rapist to be present at any family gathering, especially not with his own infant daughter in attendance. He had become a father himself recently, and the thought of having someone capable of sexual assault around children was absolutely unacceptable to him. But the timing of this revelation couldn't have been worse for Angie and Nico's relationship. Apparently, Nico had been planning to propose to Angie at the baby shower, turning the celebration into a double event that would announce both their growing family and their engagement. When the shower was canceled and the rape allegation came to light, the proposal was immediately called off, and their entire fairy tale narrative came crashing down around them. Angie was absolutely furious with me for speaking up after all these years. She accused me of deliberately timing my revelation to destroy their happiness and ruin what should have been the most special moment of their relationship. Several of our old high school acquaintances reached out to attack me on social media, claiming that since I hadn't spoken up back then, I had lost the right to do so now. In that moment, I realized that telling the truth about sexual assault doesn't just threaten the perpetrator, it threatens everyone who has invested in pretending the assault never happened, and they will fight just as hard to protect their comfortable lies as they will to protect the rapist himself. But the backlash I was experiencing from Angie and her friends was nothing compared to the devastating family destruction that was about to unfold, as the truth I had finally spoken began tearing apart relationships that had existed for decades, leaving everyone forced to choose sides in a battle I never wanted to start. The revelation didn't just affect Angie and Nico's relationship, it completely shattered her entire extended family. Her mother, who had been like a second mom to me throughout my childhood, called me in tears, begging me to understand how much pain I was causing. "You're ruining Angie's happiness over something like that," she pleaded, refusing to even use the word rape when referring to what had happened to me. The woman who had once comforted me during my parents' divorce and treated me like her own daughter was now asking me to prioritize her daughter's comfort over my own trauma and healing. The pressure to stay silent became overwhelming. Family members who had once welcomed me into their homes were now calling to ask if I would consider taking back my statement or at least apologizing to Angie for the timing of my revelation. They seemed to believe that because I had survived the assault and moved on with my life, the damage was already done and there was no point in destroying everyone else's happiness over something that happened so long ago. Even worse was my own mother's reaction when she learned what had happened to me. Instead of offering support or expressing outrage on my behalf, she responded with shame and horror that seemed directed more at me than at my rapist. "Were you used like that?" she asked, as if I had been permanently damaged or defiled by what Nico had done to me. She was acting exactly the way I had been afraid she would, treating rape like something shameful that reflected poorly on my character, rather than recognizing it as a crime that had been committed against me. My mother immediately began pressuring me to keep the information from the rest of our extended family, worried about what people would think and how it might affect our family's reputation. She seemed more concerned about managing the social fallout than she was about my emotional well-being or ensuring that justice was served. The way she looked at me had changed completely, and I could tell that she now saw me as damaged goods rather than as her daughter who had survived a traumatic experience. The family divisions became even more complex when Angie's brother's wife entered the picture. She thanked me privately for speaking up, explaining that she had always felt uncomfortable around Nico but could never quite put her finger on why. Now that she knew the truth about his character, she understood her instincts and felt grateful that I had given her the information she needed to protect herself and her children. However, this created even more tension within the family, as she refused to attend any gathering where Nico would be present. A complicated compromise emerged for family events like weddings and holidays. Angie's brother would attend the celebrations, but his wife and baby daughter would stay home rather than be in the same space as someone capable of sexual assault. This arrangement satisfied no one and served as a constant reminder of the divisions my truth-telling had created. Every family gathering became a careful negotiation about who could attend and who would be excluded, turning joyful occasions into sources of stress and conflict. Meanwhile, Nico continued living his life without facing any real consequences for his actions. He had never apologized, never acknowledged the harm he had caused, and never made any attempt to make amends for sexually assaulting me. While I was dealing with family destruction, social media attacks, and pressure to stay silent, he was simply continuing his relationship with Angie as if nothing had happened, protected by a system that prioritized his comfort over my justice. What I learned during this devastating period was that speaking the truth about sexual assault doesn't just threaten the perpetrator, it forces everyone around you to confront their own complicity in protecting rapists. And most people would rather destroy the messenger than examine their own moral failures. Right at that moment when the pressure to recant my story reached its peak and everyone seemed united in wanting me to disappear back into silence, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could either crumble under the weight of their victim blaming, or I could stand firm in my truth and finally prioritize my own healing over everyone else's comfort. The first thing I did was screenshot and archive every single nasty message, every accusatory comment, and every attempt to gaslight me into believing that I was the problem. I documented the victim blaming, the attempts to silence me, and the social media attacks, because I understood that this evidence might be important later, and I wanted a record of how people really react when sexual assault survivors dare to speak their truth. Watching these messages pile up was emotionally exhausting, but it also served as a stark reminder of why so many survivors choose to stay silent rather than face this kind of systematic destruction. During this overwhelming period, I started going to therapy to help me process not just the original trauma of being raped, but the secondary trauma of being blamed and ostracized for finally speaking up about it. My therapist helped me understand that the shame and self-blame I was carrying wasn't mine to bear. It belonged to Nico, who had committed the assault, and to everyone who had chosen to protect him rather than support me. She explained that my silence hadn't protected anyone except my rapist, and that speaking the truth was actually an act of courage that could prevent him from harming other women in the future. One of the most important realizations I had during therapy was that Nico had never once apologized for what he had done to me. In all the years since the assault, through all the family drama and relationship complications, he had never acknowledged that raping an unconscious person was wrong, never expressed remorse for the trauma he had caused, and never made any attempt to make amends or seek forgiveness. His complete lack of accountability made it clear that he didn't view what he had done as a serious crime, which meant he was likely to do it again to someone else if given the opportunity. The support I received from unexpected sources helped sustain me through the darkest moments of this ordeal. Angie's brother's wife continued to thank me privately for speaking up, explaining that my courage had given her the information she needed to protect her daughter and trust her own instincts about dangerous people. My own partner and close friends rallied around me, offering emotional support and validation when my own family was failing to provide it. These relationships reminded me that there were still people in the world who believed survivors and prioritized safety over social comfort. As the months passed and the initial shock of the revelation wore off, the family dynamics settled into an uncomfortable new normal. Angie's brother maintained his position that Nico would not be welcome at family events where his wife and child were present, which meant that major celebrations like weddings became complicated negotiations about attendance and seating arrangements. Some family members supported his stance, while others continued to pressure everyone to just forgive and forget for the sake of family unity. Throughout all of this chaos and destruction, I never once regretted my decision to tell the truth. Yes, it had cost me relationships and caused tremendous pain for multiple families, but I finally understood that relationships built on protecting rapists and silencing survivors were never healthy relationships to begin with. The truth had simply revealed the moral character of everyone involved, and while that revelation was painful, it was also liberating. Looking back now, I can see that speaking my truth didn't ruin anyone's life. It simply revealed the natural consequences of building happiness on a foundation of lies. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in systems that protect predators at the expense of survivors. If you're a survivor reading this, know that your truth matters more than their comfort. Speaking up doesn't ruin lives, it reveals who people really are. You deserve to be believed, supported, and free from shame that was never yours to carry. The hardest lesson I learned is that protecting others from uncomfortable truths only enables more harm. But when we choose courage over silence, we not only free ourselves but potentially save others from experiencing the same trauma. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button to help others find it. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And subscribe to join our community of resilient souls who've learned that sometimes being underestimated is your greatest superpower. Together, we're writing new endings to old stories, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you.